Days, from the time of Newton onwards, people had to study Arabic as an obligatory language. Copernicus, Newton, they had to know Arabic. They know Arabic. There's evidence that they did so. The problem is that it was very difficult to admit, because of this tension between the Christian church at the time, between them and the scientists on the one hand, and hence the emergence of secularism, and between them and Muslims in Spain and Muslims in North Africa and the rest of the Middle East. So any emerging scientist who want to actually express a scientific theory and so on, and when he gets it from the Muslims, it would be very difficult for him or her to say this actually comes from a Muslim source. That explains why a lot of the work of these great people actually has not carried the name of the original people. They had to hide it because of the political tension at the time. People like Al-Hassani Al-Haytham, who sometimes we call Al-Hazan, the inventor of the camera. He has revolutionized the optics, the idea that how people actually look and how do they see. People before him, and the pharaohs, the Greeks, the Romans, the Chinese, the Indians, they all used to think that the eye has an invisible ray that shines on the object and then it sees. That's how people used to think the seeing was. He said, no, it's all wrong. It's the other way around. Light is reflected from the object in a straight line, goes into our eyes. Our eyes are like a dark room. It's like a kamara. Kamara in Arabic is a dark room. And he has demonstrated it as a laboratory demonstration experiment. He makes a dark room, puts a pinhole in one side of the wall, and show people that actually the camera, this camera is that it brings in the pictures from outside to inside, and that's what people used to use. They call it camera obscura. Most of the artists like Leonardo da Vinci and others use it to paint. If you want to paint a scene, you go inside this camera obscura, or you want to paint a person outside, you go inside there, and then you paint the picture, you put the outlines, and then you put the colors afterward. And then, of course, the theory has changed into lenses and experimental method, the concept of optics and ray theories, focus, and so on. There's enormous amount of I mean, he's written 45 books on various subjects, mainly in optics. 1,000 years ago, Al-Zahrawi, because he saw women in pain, especially those who are pregnant, and when they have to have a hard labor and they cannot push the child out. So, and the forceps which he developed, which is like sort of 2 spoons in reverse to pull the baby out, if these are dangerous and they may not work in that particular instant, then what they do is the cesarean operation. Cesarean operation means you cut the upper abdomen, and then you cut the womb, take the fetus out, the baby out, stitch the womb, and then what you do, you put the upper abdomen and stitch it again. But what do you do about the thread which you've used in stitching the womb? The body starts rejecting it, and there will be an infection, and the lady will die. Or you have to cut her abdomen again after 3 weeks, and then go back to the original incision, take the thread out, and then stitch again, and then take that stitch after another 3 weeks. So it's a very painful operation. What he did, he discovered that the intestine of the cat, am'a al-qat, right, could be used as a string, and if you stitch the wound, the incision, with it, the body accepts it, it doesn't reject it, and it will also dissolve after 3 weeks. This discovery, this invention, is still with us today. If you go out to your nearest hospital and ask them, say, what is the material of this? What do you use for stitching? They'll tell you it's cat gut, which means am'a al-qat, right? Or the inside, the gut of the cat. Not been changed. Can you imagine if Al-Zahrawi had patented this invention for 1,000 years of taking revenues and taking royalties? He probably will be owning the whole of Dubai with its petrol and water and everything. But in those days, like we heard from Al-Bayruni, he was sort of driven by a very high humanistic objective, which is for the sake of God. The first university, as we know it, history tells us the first university was built by a young lady. Her name was Fatima al-Fihriya in the city of Fez in the year 870. Sometimes they say it's 855 and so on. Now this lady decides to build a mosque, but as a university, for the sake of education and humanity, driven by her religious understanding. So what she does, she actually fasts the day of inauguration and keeps fasting every day until the final opening, when the whole building has been complete, and they do a ceremony there, and she breaks the fast in front of people. Young girls like that who can actually, and this monument is still there. It's fantastic. The other thing about his designs, it's manifested in the Suleymaniye Mosque, who, I don't know how many of you have been to Istanbul and have been to Suleymaniye Mosque. You probably have never noticed this. In the Suleymaniye Mosque, like in most large mosques, there are so many lights, about 1,000 bulbs in order to lit this space. But in those days, they were lit by candles or by oil lamps. And you try to use a candle in a small room or confined space, you will not be able to breathe after about half an hour. So how could people use in this huge mosque with so many, thousands of candles with all the smoke and can continue to breathe? You open the window, it'll be too cold, and then it probably will put out. So it is clever design. There was the air comes from underneath and takes this hot air up, and the smoke is collected on the top, and it's guided into a filter room that collects all the smoke. And then what do they do with the smoke that is collected? All this smog, the soot. They take it and put it in a small well, which converts it into black ink they use for writing manuscripts. The air comes out clean to the city, right? But the recycling is there, and it really is fantastic.